What is going on, everyone? Today we're taking a look at the RTX 5060 Ti. This is the WindForce model by Gigabyte. We've got the 16 gig version, and we're going to be checking it out in Borderlands 4 today at 1080p, 1440p, and 4K resolutions, and we'll be pairing it with the AMD 9800X3D and 32 gigs of RAM. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. If you're not new here, thank you for coming back. I appreciate it. What is going on, everyone? We are diving into Borderlands 4 again today, and we are at 1080p, and we're at 100 FPS here at low settings. Again, we have the RTX 5060 Ti. It's got the 16 gigabytes of VRAM on it, and we've got it paired today with the AMD 9800X3D and 32 gigabytes of RAM. All right, so let's just jump up here and see what all we can make happen. So we're at 101, 105 FPS, around there, about 100 FPS on low settings with no upscaling and no frame generation. Let's just kind of go through these settings rather quickly so we can get to the good stuff. All right, so from low to medium, we're going to see a little bit of a drop in performance, but it's still going to be pretty good. All right, at 79, 80 FPS here with no upscaling and no frame generation. So we can keep working on this, and I just want to implement some DLSS right when we get around 60, just to get that frame rate to boost back up, and just keep working through the settings that way. All right, so we're just going to see what we can do at 1080p and then 1440p and then at 4K. I've got chapter markers set up so you'll be able to follow along and jump to the section that you care about the most. All right, so let's just jump into here and go to high. So on high settings, we are looking like that gives us about a 60 FPS experience. Now, what I will say is right here, I would probably recommend doing some DLSS. This game, while it does have a smooth frame pacing, it doesn't have the highest frame rate, if that makes sense. So if I do comment that it is smooth, that's because it is smooth. However, the frames are just not that high. The frame time graph is nice and flat, but you know, we would expect to not have to use DLSS on 1080p, but such is life. We are going to use some DLSS. Let's just jump over here and do that now. Actually, let's go to very high. Let's just see how bad it gets. All right, so very high. This is again with no DLSS upscaling. Of course, no frame generation. That's about 50 or so FPS. I selected this area just because it is kind of open, got some different segments in it, and I did get a lot of swing in my performance depending on where you're at here. But you know, it is a nice area to test in because I killed all the enemies and I don't have to fight the whole time that I'm doing this test. So that's a positive. Yeah, it tends to drop down a little bit up here for some reason, but it all is pretty consistent with what I've seen so far in the game to this point, which is about 20 minutes in or so. All right, so let's just jump over and go to the very next setting, which is badass. So this is badass settings with no upscaling and no frame generation. That gives me, let everything kind of pop in. It's doing this a lot on this card. I haven't seen it on any card other than this one. But when you change those settings, it really has to struggle to load stuff back in. I don't know what is causing that, but you know, there you go. I'm calling it out because it's not something I've seen on the 5070 at all, or 5070 Ti rather. All right, so that gives you about 43 FPS once everything calms back down. Definitely want to improve this. So let's just jump over and go back to this high setting and then turn on some upscaling, which would be, of course, DLSS quality. We are on an NVIDIA card, so we want to utilize that the best we can. Give it a minute. It's taking its time to think about it. Once we get back, though, we'll see how it all runs. All right, so we are looking at 84, 83 FPS. So that definitely gave us a nice bump. And I've said this on my 5070 Ti video. DLSS looks really good in this title because the edges are all basically outlined in black, so you don't have to worry about any like fringe details being lost. Sometimes the cracks on the ground will get a little jittery, but you know, for the most part, it upscales really nicely. And you know, unfortunately, you're just going to have to use upscaling on this title. It does again run smoothly. It just does not run at a very high FPS generally. So you know, you could have a high FPS with a janky experience, but in this case, it's not janky. It's just not a super high FPS. So let's just keep going here and going to the next level. So we're going to maintain that quality DLSS and jump over here and go to very high to see if that sticks us right around 60. Yeah, it does. Okay, so 65 to 70. That's a pretty good showing right here. Now, this is not the badass setting. Once we go to the badass setting, it'll definitely be under 60, and we'll probably have to go up a little bit more on our DLSS. So let's just do that now. We're going to run through 1440p after this. So again, if you want to jump ahead, of course, I love that you watch the whole video, but if you're on a budget, you know, on a time budget, time crunch, I get it. You can jump ahead. That's why I got the chapter marker set up. So right here, looks like going to badass settings really didn't hurt us too terribly bad. So it looks like the difference between very high and badass isn't that drastic. So let's go over to balanced here and just kind of work our way back down to see how high we can get this. And then we'll check out some frame generation before we jump over to 1440p. Looks like 62 FPS, 61 FPS. So, you know, again, that DLSS balanced setting is helping us out down here. Again, it kind of runs a little bit worse on the top of the mountain up here for some reason. Yeah, there it is down in the 50s. But yeah, for the most part, it's a nice like 10 FPS swing, which is a common thing in games. You know, it's not going to be locked unless you lock it. But yeah, we're looking at upper 50s to low 60s right here on these current settings. So let's just go down one more, check out performance, see how that does for us. And that is going to give us a much more respectable frame rate, about 70 FPS. Looks like it's about a 5 to 10 FPS difference as you go down respectively in those DLSS settings. So let's just jump up to maybe quality and then run some frame generation. We're just going to check out 2x quality and see what that does. I am going to bring my PCL up, so give me 1 second. I'll bring that up and be right back. All right, we've got our PCL up there now that we're doing some frame generation. I wanted to keep an eye on that, but it's still pretty nice. 42 milliseconds, in my opinion, is anything kind of below 50 is kind of where I like to be generally. Now, I'm not a competitive player. I'm not really sure what a competitive player would want, you know, as far as what that PCL is, but as far as like just playing through the story and enjoying a game, I think 50 milliseconds is perfectly fine. With that frame generation left on, I did want to come down to performance just to give people kind of an idea of what you would expect on a performance level. You know, at least, you know, if you're on this card and you do want to potentially compete online, you're looking at about 40 milliseconds here and 123, 134 FPS. But if you were online, you would probably want to come down more around the medium to low. So I'll go low, low performance. Let's turn frame gen off for right now. This would kind of give you an insight into what you could expect online. If you did get into like a very performance-oriented type of, you know, competing online and that kind of stuff. So you're at 135, 140 FPS here, and your PCL is like really low. I mean, I've never seen it quite that low in most games that I play. So yeah, if you want to get that PCL really low, that's your latency. You're at 18 milliseconds here on these settings, which I'm sure you could probably even get that even better if you wanted to run ultra performance. You could check that out as well and see what you could expect there. 168 FPS and your PCL didn't really change too terribly much. It did give you a little bump to your FPS, but you're looking at about 20-ish milliseconds of latency, which is very, very good in my opinion. You know, again, I don't like to speak a lot about the competitive stuff because I don't personally do it. But yeah, if you were wanting to get a high refresh with a low PCL, this would be one way to do it. And if you wanted to just sweeten it up, you could throw that frame generation in there at 4x and see what that gives you. Of course, your frames per second are going to be just astronomically high. And it did add a little bit of latency to it using that 4x frame generation, but not much at all. So you kind of, you know, seeking that balance of what you wanted to potentially compete with. That hopefully gives you a little bit of insight into what those settings might look like for you and what you can expect at 1080p with more of a competitive setting. So with all that out of the way, let's jump up to 1440p, and I'm going to start with a low setting again, and we're going to turn off all the upscaling just to get like a base performance level, and then I will see you in just 1 second. All right, so here we are at 1440p low, no upscaling, no frame generation. We're at 72 FPS. PCL is about 29 milliseconds. Of course, the VRAM on this card has, we're at 16 gigs of VRAM. That's probably not, I'm not going to comment too much on it just because I don't foresee us getting anywhere near 16. But, for what it's worth, it is over there, and it is quite low. Allocated VRAM is 6. Used VRAM is 5.3. Just, to keep in mind, if you are considering the 8 gigabyte version of this card, which I do not recommend, there is your VRAM over there on the left. Otherwise, the cards are identical, but I still recommend getting the 16 gigabyte just to give you a little bit more of a future-proof card. 8 gigabytes is just not quite enough anymore, even sometimes for 1080p. But anyway, that's just a little PSA. Let's jump over to medium, and let's see what that does for us. All right, so that gives us 55 FPS, 39 milliseconds of latency, and a little bit of a jump up on our allocated VRAM 6.6. All right, so right here at 61, I would probably say you're going to need a little bit more of upscaling. We're not doing any right now, so we're going to need jump up to that quality. Let's just jump over here and see what we can do on quality. So this is quality medium. Let's see what kind of lift that gives us. Yeah, that gives us a nice little jump up to 75 FPS here at medium settings, and a PCL of 27 milliseconds, which is also quite nice. 6.4 allocation with a 5.7 used, not spilling over at all, and our system RAM's looking good at 17.7. Got 32 on this machine, so should not have any system RAM issues at all either. Let's jump up to high, leave quality on because we're going to need it. All right, so let's just jump over here. That gives us 60 FPS experience here on high settings. Now, it's not very high and it's not badass, but, it is pretty nice looking. Quality DLSS looks fantastic, all the way down to probably performance on this title. Again, that's largely due to the art style. On 1440p, I would normally not recommend going down to performance unless you just really don't care that much about the fuzziness that it can introduce. But right here, it does look pretty good, and, you're right around 60. So if you're not competing, 60 FPS is, again, kind of a nice benchmark to go for. But again, it's not really hitting 60 consistently. Here and there it might, but it's not really staying there. So I'd probably say at high, you would want to go down to balanced and turn that on. And let's see, that gives us a little bit more, probably about 10 FPS on average. And looks like gave our VRAM a little bit of a break, 6.8, didn't go up. That's a good thing. And we are at a PCL of 32 milliseconds. So 65 FPS with these settings does look quite nice. Again, you can go down to performance on this title. Again, just because of the dark black outlines and the high contrast, I feel like it lends itself to being upscaled a little bit better than other titles that are more realistic. But we'll explore and see what it takes to run the very high settings and the badass settings. Of course, here at balance, it's probably not going to be around 60 at all. Yeah, 51 FPS here. You could just do some frame generating, but again, this is a pretty snappy game. I don't like to recommend FPS, as in first-person shooters. I don't like to recommend anything below 60 just because the nature of the game just does require a little bit quicker movements, and it's just more fun to have a nice high refresh rate whenever you're on a mouse and keyboard with a first-person shooter. But anyway, let's just keep going and jump down to a performance setting here at very high. Let's see if that does anything for us at all. All right, so 62 FPS, 63 FPS. We're looking like 7.3 allocation and 6.6 on used. All right, but yeah, our PCL is staying nice and low, 30 milliseconds. That's quite nice. That's a good latency for a game like this for sure. I mean, the lower the better, but it's not like 70 or 80, which is more tolerable on like a slower paced title. And this is definitely not a slow paced title. All right, so let's just jump over here. I saw some high 50s in there, so we might need to go a little bit harder on our DLSS at 1440. I don't really think you're going to be able to have a good experience on 4K without substantially dropping the DLSS down and using frame generation. However, right here on badass settings with performance, you are managing to stay in the 50s most of the time. Still not quite where I would personally want to be. this card is more than capable of running games at 1440p if they're properly optimized. I can't really make a comment on this title. You know, it is using some Unreal Engine, Lumen, so that stuff is extremely demanding. So I have seen titles run better than this, but as far as smoothness, it is nice and smooth. So on badass settings, let's go to ultra performance and see if that improves our frame rate enough to at least get over 60. Yeah, it does get over 60. Now, it is a little bit soft, but you know, that's got a lot to do with, you know, the upscaling is from a pretty low upscale, like 360p, I believe, at this point, all the way up to 1440. So you're looking like pretty good considering you're running a title at an extremely low background resolution and then using AI upscaling to achieve 75 FPS. But yeah, your PCL is nice and low, but you know, that's kind of like where I would draw the line would be probably on this title at 1440. I think performance does still look better, and I would just kind of rely on dropping my settings to maybe high and then doing some frame generation, maybe on just 2x and see what that looks like. So this is high performance with 2x frame generation, and that does feel a little bit more latent. It's on about, let's see, 40 milliseconds. I can tell a little bit from when it was at like 23, 24, 30 even, but it's not the end of the world. I still feel like it's a nice way to play it. Now, if you wanted to get that latency down on the high setting, you could go down in your upscaling, which unfortunately is about the only way you can get that to drop enough to give you a better PCL. And again, ultra performance is slightly blurry. It's not like end of the world blurry. I've definitely seen games that look horrendous at ultra performance. This looks passable. It looks just kind of like the dark black ink is a little bit like spreading into like imaginary paper. It's kind of what I can say it looks like, because this game definitely has like a comic book vibe to it. So, you know, again, there's some lines in here that are flickering. You know, could I get over it? Maybe. I think I could. Some people are, you know, like, I don't like it, and they'll just use frame generation. But yeah, that's kind of an exhaustive list of all the different settings you could combine to get 1440p to run nicely. Now, I would probably just say low is fine, and then bring that up to quality, and then turn your frame generation off. Let's see what that looks like. I'm just trying to see what we can test to get you guys like a pretty good idea. While I might not test exactly what you're looking for, it gives you hopefully a good idea what you can expect. But yeah, that PCL is nice. Now it's at 22 milliseconds, 90 FPS, and to be honest, low settings, again, just because of the lighting that very high and badass introduce. This still looks good. You're just not getting that lumen depth to the lighting. So, you know, it's all personal. Anyway, let's see what this game runs like at 4K. Now, again, I'm not expecting miracles, but let's just jump in here and see what we can expect and go from there. All right, so 4K at low settings with no upscaling, you are pretty rough. You're at 35 FPS. Your PCL's at 62, 64. It's definitely not a good experience. So we're absolutely at 4K going to rely heavily on upscaling and frame generation to get this to become a decent experience. Let's see if we can keep it on low. Let's go up and see what quality gives us. Probably not going to be enough. Probably going to have to go all the way to performance. Quality gives us a decent boost up to 53, 52 FPS. Again, this is at low settings. This is not anywhere near the top end of the settings at all. So, yeah, if you wanted to come in and expect 60, you're probably going to have to just start at balanced. And we're just going to start at, not balanced, start at performance, and then just work our way up. All right, so that's a much smoother experience. 29 on your PCL up there, 29 milliseconds. FPS is at 64. Allocated VRAM's at 6.6. Again, this is at low settings, so we're just like gonna assume that balanced and quality just don't exist. We're just gonna have to use performance no matter what. All right, so let's see kind of where it begins to fall apart. If we go up to medium, here at 4K. Again, this is not a 4K card on this title, at least. It can be for some older games, for sure. You know, that's not a blanket statement. I try to avoid saying cards are certain resolution cards because it all depends on the game, the age of the game, ray tracing on or off. It's a paper thin thing to say, in my opinion. So I try not to, like, you know, say that this card is an exactly a whatever resolution card. So take that into consideration when I'm going through this too. I don't mean to say that this card is not a 4K card. You can absolutely run certain games at 4K. But yeah, you are looking like 58 FPS here. Now, if we go up any at all, it's going to really probably fall apart. We're going to probably have to go to an ultra performance setting. Yeah, 45, 44 FPS. Now, if this was a game that was not a snappy first-person shooter, I would say that you're probably okay here and to just do some frame generation. But, you know, unfortunately, this game, in my opinion, really needs to have 60 FPS to be able to really fully enjoy it. And I just don't know if this card's going to be enough at 4K to get that done. Let's go to Ultra Performance. At 4K, Ultra Performance doesn't look too bad. The only time it falls apart are in these little cracks over here. I'm trying to walk over there to them. If you kind of see them, they're kind of like flickering around here. But largely, the art style hides any sort of, you know, artifact and weirdness other than these thin lines here, because you know, having all this like dark black outline on everything kind of does hide that typical DLSS like fringy flickering stuff. So, you know, I guess that's one way to look at it. But yeah, you can go up from here on Ultra Performance maybe to very high. Let's just see what that does. So very high is going to give you 55 FPS here at 4K. Now, we can't upscale anymore. This is the highest on the upscaling we can do. So we're going to have to probably rely on frame generation to get this over the hump, so to speak. But a 35 millisecond PCL ain't bad at all. I mean, that's pretty good, you know, if you're not competing. I assume that you would want lower for competitions, but 65 FPS, nothing to scoff at for sure. Let's go to badass settings, Ultra Performance, no frame generation. Yet. But, you know, as we did discover that very high and badass don't really have the biggest gap between them. So here at Ultra Performance with badass settings and no frame generation, you're at high 40s, mid 50s probably, depending on, you know, where you're at. But yeah, let's just say that this is probably the best you're going to expect at 4K. Now, you could frame generate, and I'm going to see what that PCL does when I do kick on. Let's just kick on 2x. It tends to be a little bit nicer to your latency at 2x versus 4. That gives us, let's see, 49 milliseconds. Right at 50, which is kind of where I like to be anyway, with 81 FPS. So you might be able to, you know, run this. This is the badass setting with 2x frame gen. Your PCL is nice, and your, of course, upscaling is pretty dramatic, but it does give you 81 FPS here. Let's see what very high will give you. Actually, let's leave it on badass. Let's go back up to performance with that 2x frame gen. I'm just curious what the PCL will be. Whew, that is bad. I mean, it feels like my mouse is attached to a rubber band. Ooh, this is not, yep, can't do that. This is not enjoyable. And I'm pretty tolerant of a little bit more latency than probably most people, and I would not want to play it like this at all. This is pretty rough. All right, so let's just see how I would probably play it at 4K. I would probably come down to medium just so I can run performance, and then I would probably kick on DLSS 2X. Let's see what that does. And let's just see if that gives us anything that is remotely playable. All right, yeah. All right, so PCL is under, oh man, God, that feels so much better. PCL is under 50. Great, perfect. The FPS is at 94. Great, perfect. And we are, you know, looking pretty good. At medium settings, the game still looks good. We're running performance DLSS. So let's see what high does. I'm just trying to kind of like play around, kind of like on the fly, and see what we can expect. So PCL is going to go up a little. I tend to tolerate it, you know, around 50 to 60. So this would be at the highest end of my tolerance for a game like this on the PCL. but it does give you 76 FPS with a little bit more, you know, visual upgrades going to that high. I don't think it's worth it though. I think medium settings on performance with 2x frame generation looked fine. Let's check out 4x before we close out, and we're just going to see what that does. So that gives us a PCL that is around 50 milliseconds, so still quite nice. Definitely something that I can work with. And we are at 154 FPS here. So this is 4K performance with a lot of frame generation. But it does look kind of nice. I mean, this is, you know, what you can just kind of expect from a card that is more meant for probably a 1080p or mid-range 1440p experience on this game. Again, I say on this game, not in general for every game, but on this game, I would say that it's like a 1440p kind of medium settings type of card, or like a lot higher, as we saw, of course, at 1080p. You can get away with a lot more. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up here. Hopefully I've been able to answer some questions about this card. It's a pretty popular card, so I wanted to get it in line first. I'm going to be going through all the 50 series as well as the 90 series, the XT models at least, of the AMD cards. So make sure you get subscribed, hit the bell, that way you don't miss it. I am a solo creator. I don't have an editing team or anything. It's all me. So just be patient. I'll get to it. Trying to do at least one a day. You know, if you get subscribed, you'll be able to see it. So I'm going to close out now. Everyone have a beautiful, wonderful Friday afternoon, and we will see you in the next one. Peace.